Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Business Acceleration Systems 2021 Speaker Series. Les McKeown is our guest this morning, and he will kick off a fabulous year with a great presentation. And here to be the host this morning and lead us through this is Wayne Mullins. He's the founder and president and CEO of Ugly Mug Marketing in Alexandria, Louisiana. Wayne, if you will take it away.
All right, Gary, thank you so much. And thank you so much for everyone that's here already. We know we've got a lot of people still coming into the room. So just a couple of quick housekeeping items, housekeeping notes here that I want to run through quickly. Number one is that during Les's presentation today, if you have questions, you have comments, you've got something that is unclear or you want more clarity around, leave a question, leave a chat. And at the end of this time, Les is going to open it up for some Q&A. And what we're going to do to help encourage you, to incentivize you to leave some questions during the presentation is we are going to give away some of Les's books to people who leave comments. So all you've got to do, leave a comment, leave a question for Les. Then at the end of this, we will go back through and select some people and we will send them copies of some of Les's wonderful books. I've got one of them right here in my hand, The Synergist. Les is going to spend a lot of time today talking about another concept of his called predictable success. And Gary's got a copy of it there. And predictable success is really what this event's about. This event is about how can you engineer, how can you structure your organization in such a way that regardless of what happens around you in the world, that you can be on a path towards predictable success. One kind of other note here that I just want to make to you, because I understand I've seen Les's presentation in person before. I understand the value of what he's going to share, and Gary does as well. My thing that I want to bring up to you right now is that I want you to go ahead and silence your phones. I want you to close your email browser. I want you to remove all distractions. If that means go close your door and lock your door and put a do not disturb sign up for the next hour, please do that. And here's the thing, Les is a professional at what he does. He's not going to be offended. He's not going to be distracted by the fact that you're not paying full attention, but your future will be offended by the fact that you didn't pay attention during Les's presentation, because it is so impactful for every organization. Les has a background in small business. As a matter of fact, Les has started over 40 companies. And in that journey, in that process of starting all those companies, he began advising others. He actually at one point was in charge of sort of like an incubator, and I'll let him kind of explain more maybe a little bit later about what that looked like and what that was. But Les's background is observing and watching what are the traits, what are the characteristics of organizations that are predictably successful. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Les. Les, thank you so much for taking the time, and we're looking forward to this.
Well, thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Gary, as well. I am too. I think this is my third, might be my fourth, but certainly my third visit back to Gary and the team at Business Acceleration System. And I always thoroughly enjoy my time here. And before I get started, I just want to commend you. I've met Gary and his team. I've met the folks who have been on the Business Acceleration System. It is a superb system that Gary's put together. And if you're even vaguely thinking about joining it, then I hope you'll take that step. And I'll share a little bit more as to why that's an important step to take, because it's going to be an integral part of what I'm going to share with you. Two quick caveats. One is I've got a stonking head cold, so I want you to forgive me in advance for any sniffles or coughs that you hear. And secondly, I'm going to share my whiteboard, so I'm going to putz around just for 1 minute, if you will forgive me. So let's share what we want you to see, and then we'll get started. Okay, so as Wayne mentioned, what I'm going to teach you here really quickly is essentially my life's work. It's been something that fell upon me, as you'll hear in a second or two, very early on. much longer ago than I would really like to tell you. And I have spent the last 40 years essentially just watching, honing, shaping everything that I'm about to share with you. And although I'm not going to ask you to actually read this, I do want to make one thing very clear, and it underlines something that Wayne just said, which is that I'm not about to share with you anything academic. I talk about the predictable success model, but that doesn't mean to say this was invented in any sort of a laboratory. No interns were used or harmed in the production of what I'm about to share with you. This is all based on my observation and my personal experiences. Gary said, through a strange combination of events. Although I started as a CPA, or the British equivalent, a chartered accountant, if you will. I'm originally from Northern Ireland, Belfast, been here 20 years, a US citizen, got my US passport, but my accent is sort of decided not to fully relocate. But back in the UK, I was originally a chartered accountant. I started advising and helping people launch their new businesses. They started to ask me if I would do that with them, join their team. And over a space of about 10 years, I got to cherry pick 6, 7, 8 of those opportunities each year. And even a dumb Irishman, and that's what I am, believe me, will start to see familiar patterns as time goes on. And it's those patterns that I'm going to share with you. I moved here just before the turn of the millennium, I'm not old, 1998, because I was pretty sure that the model that I saw in startups and smaller growth companies would prove out over larger organizations of any size. And I got an opportunity to come, move to the San Francisco area originally. I'm now in beautiful Maryland in the Chesapeake Bay, but I got to work with Microsoft, T-Mobile, US Army, Harvard University. I saw all American Express. I saw all shapes and sizes of business, for profit actually, and not for profit. And so it proved out that this model that I'm going to share with you actually is what happens to every business, to every organization, including yours. And what my life's goal is to help people like you with your own business avoid some of these pitfalls. My model is one great way to do it. If you combine that with a superb group of mentors and peers that you'll get through BAS, and Gary will talk a bit about this at the end, you've got the perfect combination for predictable success. So let's get started. What we're going to see here is that every business goes through 7 stages. You can see these stages here, and 4 of them are very clearly problematic. As we'll see, these 4 stages that I'm shown here as these wiggly lines are times in your business, and as you hear me talk about them, I'm 100% can guarantee many of you are going to say, oh yeah, I've been there. These are times when it's clear that the business is facing some problems, some issues. There are 3 stages here that look like they're much easier. That there's no, I mean, it's not as if we don't have our problems, but there's no existential threat to the business. We're dealing with day-to-day issues as opposed to, are we going to make it type issues? Here's the first takeaway, just 3 minutes in. One of those so-called safe zones is an illusion. And I'll explain why in a moment or two. And what that boils down to is your first takeaway is that of these 7 stages, there are only 2 of them that you want to be in. Now, of those 2, you can choose either, and I'll make clear to you which one would be right for you and your business. You can sit in either of them, but you only want to be in 2 of these 7 stages. So let's take a look at what they look like and how we progress through them. The first stage down here, right at the outset, is the one that probably most of you are going to be have most memory about, and it's probably one that at least some of you are currently still in, and it's the stage I call early struggle. And I call it that because that's what it is. It's a struggle. It's typically about 3 years, which is clearly a vast generalization. But what usually happens when we launch something is we spend the first year sort of in denial until we accept that our wonderful idea isn't just exactly what the market needs. We spend year 2 retooling, and then year 3, we start to get some traction. And that's a long period of time. Now, obviously, some businesses accelerate out of early struggle faster than that. Some get stuck in there for a lot longer. But on average, it's around about 3 years. And what's essentially happening here is that this is a race against time. We're looking to try to get to the point where our dependence on what we're fancily calling external funding, you know, you read a lot about startups, I do anyway, and we hear these fancy terms like angel financing and, you know, venture capital. And the reality is the vast majority of us start our businesses through cashing out our credit cards, through borrowing money from friends and family, you know, sticking our hands down the back of the settee to try to find loose coins, selling the settee, anything that'll keep us going until we start getting regular, foreseeable cash from operations. And that's when we've reached sustainability, when we've found a profitable, sustainable market. Now, here's the thing. The mortality rate in early struggle is huge. In a good year, 80% of all new ventures fail. That's in normal times. 80% of all new ventures fail. The IRS tell you it's about 2/3 from their records. Here's the thing. Back from my days as a serial entrepreneur, I know there's a huge number of new ventures fail before they even file with the IRS or with anybody. So the real number in a good year is 80%. Sadly, the sort of times that we've just been through, it's going to be even higher than that. What are the distinguishing characteristics? What gets you out of early struggle? What makes you one of the 1 in 5? 2 things. One is a ruthless focus, an absolutely ruthless focus on beating this deadline. A ruthless focus on finding your predictable market, your profitable, sustainable market. And if you're in early struggle at the moment, you need every week, at the end of the week, to review, are you closer to finding a profitable, sustainable market? What's the second thing that gets you out of early struggle and in that pretty elite Darwinian small group of 1 in 5 that get to the next stage? It's this individual here. It's someone that I call the visionary. Every startup, every new venture needs a visionary, either as the founder or in the founding team. Now, what do we mean by a visionary? It sounds very grandiose. Doesn't mean necessarily somebody goes up a mountaintop and, you know, meditates. We're talking about somebody, it's in the name, has the vision. Somebody who has got a long-term vision for what they want to do. We're talking about somebody these people are often charismatic. They don't need to be profoundly or racially charismatic. Sometimes they've just got a steely charisma, but you know who they are. You can tell the founder in a team because they've got that sort of charisma. They've got an ability to communicate, whether they've got what we Irish call the gift of the gab or not. There's a way in which other people see their vision, and as we'll see in a moment or two, want to help them. They're visual thinkers, they're creative, highly creative, they take risks. But here's the thing about a visionary. A visionary will only invest his or her time and energy in something if it's really going to make a big difference. And they'll get incredibly enthusiastic about it until, squirrel, they see the next thing. Visionaries have a high squirrel factor. It's what I call the shiny new ball syndrome. You'll have heard that phrase before. But that's because visionaries at their very core are starters. This is where a visionary gets his or her endorphin rush. That's when they get to scratch their visionary itch, when they start things. The moment of visualizing something is the moment of peak enthusiasm for a visionary. Now, for that reason, if they're going to get out of this stage and into the next, they need to work alongside somebody else. If they're going to get into the next stage, which I call the fun stage, highly technical phrase for this stage, they need a second type of person. If you think about the visionary in the way that I've just described them, you can see that left to themselves, they're going to just keep turning their wheels. They're going to come up with a new idea and then play around with it, try something else, try another thing. They need a second type of individual who I call the operator. And in a moment or two, we're going to see what the operator brings to the table. But when they link up with one or more operators, what it does is it pushes them into the second stage, which I call fun. Why is it fun? Because it's not early struggle. We've found our profitable, sustainable market. We know what it is that we're doing. We know what the cool kids call our avatar is. We know who we're selling to. We know what we're selling to them. And now there's a ton of low-hanging fruit. So we get out there and we sell like crazy. Now, in the meantime, we've got the visionary who previously came up with the idea and was in charge of everything, is now conducting a sort of an orchestra of individuals who are these high charging operators. Now, what does an operator do? An operator is one thing only. An operator is somebody who is a ruthless finisher. You remember our picture of the visionary? And all of those adjectives that we gave to the visionary. An operator doesn't get any of that. They're just a ruthless finisher. And they wouldn't thank you for lots of fancy adjectives because they don't think that way. Our operator is the one who goes through breeze block walls to get things done. The operator is the one who is the perfect symbiotic twin of our starter visionary. So the visionary, great idea, comes in. Last time you want to meet a visionary, by the way, is Monday morning after they've had, the weekend to think about things, because they come in with yet another squirrel big idea. The operator, and by the time we're in fun, there's typically more than one. The operators are the ones who then make it happen. And together, the ruthless finisher, the operator, and the starter visionary are a perfect combination, and they sell like crazy. There's one word that these pair are saying more than anything else during the fun stages. Three-letter word, starts with Y, ends with S. It's yes. We say yes to everything in fun. Everything, we will do it. Phone goes, yes. You don't know what I'm going to ask you yet. Oh, fair enough, but yes, I'll do it. We might say we have a product sheet or a spec sheet. We don't. We'll do anything the customer wants, partially because we're terrified of falling back into early struggle, partially because there's so much low-hanging fruit. And so we grow. Of course, we're very, very flexible. Customers, clients love us. And so we start to grow. We say yes to everything, somehow make it happen, and we get it done somehow. And so during this period, one thing happens that's going to come back, and it's going to have a problematic impact, is we build the myths and legends of the business. If you've been in a business that's beyond this stage, you'll often have heard people, maybe you're one of them, who talk about and share the myths and legends, essentially, of the fun stage. Do you remember that time we flew to Chicago, didn't think we had a chance of getting that piece of work, and you sat all night and came up with that fantastic PowerPoint. We went in and slayed. That was what we retell these myths and legends. And inherent in the myths and legends is a problem. They worked for this stage. What we did then worked then, and as we'll see in a second or two, ceases to work after a moment, after a while. Now, here we are in fun. What's going to happen? We're going to grow because we're flexible and enthusiastic and evangelical. As we grow, we get a little more complex and a little more complex and a little more complex. And at some point, we fall into a stage that I call whitewater. And at that point, the complexity that we've built up with our very success in itself is beginning to overwhelm us. It's getting to the stage where we can't just say yes to everything and make it happen. We come in and we're getting screamed at from so many places, and it's not all now customers and clients wanting new business. It's this thing's not working properly. That we said we would do, we've fallen down on. And it's a bit like an old music hall act that some of you are a little older, you may remember. You can still see it on YouTube, where this guy, it was typically a guy, would come up on stage and he'd start putting big dinner plates up on top of bamboo poles and spinning them. And he'd put one more up and one more up and one more up. And you think, how on earth? And suddenly he's starting to run around the stage and he's just keeping these bamboo poles spinning, and the plates are up there. And at some point, you hear the sound of breaking china, because one of the dinner plates has swayed and fallen. And once that starts, it's a race to try to get them up before they all fall down. And that's a little bit like what it is in whitewater. All of this stuff we've said yes to begins to pile up. We start to make mistakes. We sign a contract with a dumb clause in it because we didn't read it properly and we're stuck in a lease we can't get out of, or we fail to turn up to a really important potential client meeting, or even worse, an actual client meeting. Whatever we're messing up with depends on the business, but we're just starting to get in our own way. It costs us because we're the one paying for all of that. Profitability goes down, and it feels a little like we got stupid in the last 6 months. How did this happen? We're doing so well back there and fun. We're same people, same customers, same product, same service, same customers. Why is this not going right? It was pretty straightforward. It's just complexity. And so the answer, although the issue is complexity, the answer is pretty simple. We need systems and processes. Now, we'll have had enough systems and processes up to now to keep us out of jail, right? We'll fill in our tax forms, and any regulations that we have to abide by, we'll stay on the right side of those. But at this point, we need to put SOPs in, standard operating practices. We've got to codify what we're doing. We've got to standardize some things so that we can repeat it. And at this stage, a third style comes on the scene. We've already seen the visionary needs to be joined very early on by the operator. Now we need someone else at senior leadership level, somebody I call the processor. So we've had the visionary starting stuff, the operator, the ruthless finisher. Now we need a sustainer. We need a maintainer. We need somebody with a left brain mentality about stuff. Somebody who's going to bring systems and processes to our now much more complex, could still be a small business, but it's just got beyond our ability to waken up, say yes to everything, and somehow make it happen. In other words, we can't deliver consistent quality anymore simply by improvising every day. We've got to be able to codify, standardize, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And so we may hire somebody about what they do depends on where we're messing up. Often it's an HR person, or it's a controller or a bookkeeper. It could be quality control, it can be somebody in a laboratory. It could be a warehouse manager. It's wherever we've been filing up, wherever we've been making mistakes. We go hire a professional to come in and help us with that. Now, at this point, something important happens in the organization. At this point, we have a different worldview than we've had right up to now. Because our visionary and our operator, who, by the way, have built very strong sweat equity during this period of time, their worldview is, let's just do the right thing, which in essence means doing whatever the customer and clients want. Let's just do it. Just do it. Let's just do the right thing and do it now. The processor's mindset is, I'm going to do the thing right. See the difference? Just do the right thing, just do it. I'm going to do the thing right. And that means processors work more slowly. They can often be a little agnostic about what the thing is. I don't really mind what you're giving me to do as long as it's within my wheelhouse and my area of technical ability. What I'm going to focus on is doing it right. And that causes a jarring of the mind in the visionary and the operator, who have been so used up to this point at just getting it done. Now we're having to put these systems and processes in place, and look at the journey the visionary and operator have been on. All of that time that they've shared together, and now it sort of feels like this person's parachuted in here. It sort of feels like they're being a bit judgmental, and it's actually getting worse. It's not making things better. We hit this whitewater stage, and I thought by hiring this person, it would actually ease it all, but it's not. It's making it more painful. Why is it making it more painful? Because putting systems and processes in place takes time and requires discipline. And our visionary just wants to do the next thing, wants to see it happen. Our operator, any operator worth their salt, they're initially really happy to see the processor, because guess what? Whenever the business first hits whitewater and we start to have all sorts of issues that we've got to deal with, we've got to fix all this stuff. We don't have our processor yet. processor hasn't yet arrived. Which of these two do you think is actually fixing stuff? Who's the one who's sweating the hard stuff and fixing it? Yes, it's our operator. Why? Because operators are fantastic at just fixing stuff, but they find it really, really frustrating. What they particularly find frustrating is that this is the arsonist. It's the visionary who's walking around setting fire to stuff, and the operator's tearing their hair out trying to get things done. Now, what happens therefore is when they first see the processor coming, they think, oh, yippee, we've got somebody who's going to slow up the visionary and we're going to be able to focus on stuff. Visionaries don't get slowed up. They just get frustrated. And then what happens when the processor first asks the operator to start coming to meetings, filling in forms, answer emails? You know, any operator, ruthless finisher, any operator worth their salt, you ask them to fill in a spreadsheet, they'd rather open up a paper clip and stab their eyes out. It's just infuriatingly painful for them. And you can see these differences in all sorts of strange ways that show up. We haven't time today to go through a lot of them, but here's a simple one. We got to move a photocopier, right? We need to move the photocopier. How's our operator going to move the photocopier? What do you think? You're going to say, this photocopier, this one here, those of you that can see me pointing. Okay, where do you want it? Over there? Well, okay. Operator, let's just put up and pushes the photocopier. Oh, should have thought about it, should have maybe unplugged it first, right? But hey, we're basically done. How does a processor move the photocopier? Sends a memo. On the 11th of February, the photocopier removal committee will approach the photocopier from the south side of the building and bending at the knee. You get the idea. Our visionary, we have a photocopier? Wow. Is it one of those 3D maker things? No, get one of those. Let's donate that old heap of junk to my charity. They're just different mindsets here, different worldviews, different ways of thinking about things, different ways even of just talking. Visionary always starts with yes. Can we? Yes, of course we can. I haven't told you what we want to do yet. Yeah, we'll do it. Processors like me usually start with no. We're risk averse. Can we do it? No, I don't think so. And that leaves our operator, you know, what? Are we opening the new office in Chicago or not? This worldview is a little bewildering, particularly for everybody else in the organization who now sees not only have we got out of fun, we're not having fun anymore, and we seem to be just dropping the ball a lot, but our senior leadership group doesn't really seem to be aligned. And what happens most often is this: who do you think is going to lose in this unstable triad? Well, it's the visionary show usually. The operator has built an enormous amount of sweat equity with the visionary. And don't forget, there's usually more than one operator. So they've got a clan of them here, all of whom have built sweat equity with the visionary. It's the poor old processor who's just newly arrived, who's got very little traction in the organization. What will happen is the visionary and the operators will start to get together and say, this isn't working. This is worse than it was before. And what's the variable here? What's the new thing? It's the processor, of course. And so what happens in many businesses is they get into Whitewater, try to fix it by bringing systems and processes in, but the body rejects the organ. The processor goes or is demoted or sidelined, and we go back to fun. Well, that's great. We're back at fun. What happens when we're back in fun? We grow like crazy. We're just going to get back into this routine that we've seen before. And what will happen? Eventually, we are yet again going to pop up here into Whitewater. And so at some point, the visionary is left thinking, if we're going to make it, if we're going to get to this next stage, we're going to have to find a way to get these three styles to work together. if we're going to get through Whitewater and into predictable success, the secret is getting the visionary operator processor styles working co-equally. Now, why would you want to do that? If it is that painful, why go through all of that grief? Why not just go back into fun and stay there? Absolutely no reason not to do that. None whatsoever. It's a perfectly valid decision. I made that decision about 15 years ago that I want to stay in fun. I've built businesses into predictable success. I now spend my life helping people build their businesses into predictable success, but I don't want to be a McKinsey. I don't want to build a Bain & Company. I've done that before. I want to stay in fun. It's a valid decision. For most of the people I work with, the decision they're making is, I want to get to predictable success. And why are they making that decision? What's the distinction between fun and predictable success? This one word: the ability to scale. You see, growth and fun will always be capped. We'll always hit this limit of Whitewater. So I'm a sole practitioner, as we say in the consulting world. There's a cap to what I can do if I'm choosing to stay in fun. If I want to scale, I've got to get into predictable success. I've got to learn how to replicate myself. You own a coffee shop and you get through early struggle, you open a second one, you open a third one. By the time you open a fourth one, I know this pattern personally really, really well, you're going to start hitting Whitewater. At that point, you have a decision. Do we go back to having at most 3 coffee shops? That way, between the two of us, we can keep an eye on them all. Or if we're going to do 4 and more, let alone become Starbucks or Caribou Coffee, we're going to have to learn how to hire people, how to train managers, how to bulk buy, how to freeze products, how to make reproducible menus rather than just come in and do what we tried in the kitchen last night. So the whole reason you would do this is to scale. Now, the trick, as we've seen, is getting the operator, visionary, processor working well together. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to show you what the capstone is, what the final linkage is that really makes that happen, because it took me nearly 20 years to see this, to discover it, to work it out. For most of this early stage in my career, I had this down to this point. And then I moved over here to see large organizations who were in predictable success for prolonged periods of time. And I saw this final capstone, which I'll share with you in just a minute. Before I do that, I want to really quickly run through the decline stage. I want to do it very fast because highly likely few of us are here, but many of you will have worked in organizations in the decline stage. And I want to just give you a little heads up as to how that plays out. What happens when we get into predictable success is that, unlike in the human life cycle, where we can't yet stop aging, I'm a walking works case study in that, actually in the organizational life cycle, if you do the right things, you can cycle in predictable success indefinitely. I think GE was in predictable success for about 17 years or so, mostly through the Jack Welch era. There's an ex-client of mine back in the UK, a graphic design agency, used to be called Triplicate, and they've been in predictable success for over 30 years. Now, they were a lab for me in building this all out, and I knew the people really, really well who ran it until recently. So, not surprisingly, they learned to do the right things. But what happens in almost every organization is, having done something that was painful, really painful, we're going to do more of it. We put systems and processes in place, so let's put in some more. And what happens is the visionary recedes and the processor becomes more prominent. And by this stage, it's not just a processor, it's a whole army of processors, and it's a mindset. It's the risk-averse mindset. And we fall into this first decline stage, which I call treadmill. Now, treadmill is a natural stage in development. It happens in every organization who's got to predictable success. They'll get pulled in there. It's not fatal in and of itself, but it's fatal if you don't get out of it. The way you get out of it is you increase the role of the visionary. You make the visionary's role, or visionaries in the organization, more prominent, and you start to build out controlled risk taking and innovation, and that pulls us back in here. But if we don't do that, something literally fatal will happen to the organization. It will fall forward into the penultimate stage, which I call the big rut, the big rut. Now, I've drawn the big rut as if it's a precipitous decline. It actually rarely is that. It's usually a long, slow slide into irrelevance. And the reason it's a long, slow slide is we've been in predictable success for a long time. We've made a boatload of money. We've got a really strong balance sheet. And you can do the same in treadmill. You can make a lot of money in treadmill. Warren Buffett, all of his investments are in organizations in treadmill, and he's making a mint, as you well know. But once you hit that big rut, you're destined to go. There's no recovery from the big rut. I'll give you an example. Harvard University, an ex-client of mine, been in the big rut for nearly 100 years, believe it or not. But they have $33 billion of near cash. So they're not going anywhere fast in terms of disappearing, but they are on a long, slow slide to irrelevancy. I think Microsoft, personally, I think Microsoft, my opinion, been in the big rut for about 7 or 8 years now, and are the same on a long slide. You know, they see the little spikes. Surface was a great product and so forth, but by and large, that's where they're going. Now, what is it that's happening here? What's happened is the visionary has disappeared. The visionary is gone. They typically sell out, retire, make themselves chairman, you know, emeritus, or just leave, just sell the business at this point. And processors like me have taken over. The operator is going to leave pretty quickly after the visionary goes, because they need the visionary to get their marching orders. And there's only one thing left to have happen, and that is we fall into the final stage, which I call death rattle. And like I say, you've got processors like me making sure that the business goes bust precisely on time. So on that happy note, I just wanted to take you through the last part of the life cycle here. I want to show you what the capstone, if there's a secret to getting into predictable success and staying there, what it is. We've already seen that if we want to get here and stay here, we've got to find a way to get these three roles to work together cohesively, co-equally. And what I noticed over the years is this: for those organizations that got into predictable success and stayed there for a prolonged period of time, they developed a fourth role. It's a role I call the synergist. What does a synergist do? Well, it does exactly what it says on the tin and what you would expect. The synergist is the person and people on the leadership team that synthesize, harmonize, buffer between the visionary operator and processor, and make sure that that team does work cohesively. Now, you can get a synergist. These are people, right? These are the folks, if we think about this way, that our visionary is the one that comes up with the what we're going to do, and the processor is the one that comes up with the how we're going to do it repeatedly, and the operator is the one that just does it. Then the synergist is all about the who. It's all about the folks. They're concerned about talent development, about internal culture, about team efficiency and effectiveness. Now, you can develop this team by importing or elevating somebody who's clearly a synergist within the organization. But actually, there's a far, far better way to do this. What I discovered over the years is that there's a single fundamental difference between these three styles and, on the other hand, the synergist style. And it's this: these three styles are natural styles. We're sort of born with them. We come out of the womb with some version of a DNA on those styles. The synergist style, on the other hand, is a learned style. You can learn to be a synergist. It's very hard to learn to be a visionary if you're not one, an operator if you're not one, a processor if you're not one. But anybody can learn to be a synergist. There are some out of the womb synergists, by my guess, about 1% of the population. They're the folks that you barely notice when they're on their own, but flower when they're in a team or group environment. But what's far better than importing one is that you get your team all to develop the ability to be a synergist. So the visionary becomes a visionary, big V, small s, visionary synergist. The operator becomes an operator synergist, can switch into synergist mode. The processors on the team become processor synergists. They learn to be a synergist. And you're asking, what does that mean? As Wayne, I think, pointed out, I've written a whole book about it called The Synergist, amazingly enough. But what I want to show you as I close is 20 words that explains the synergist mindset. This is the synergist mindset. This is what you want to get your senior team to do as you're beginning to move into and want to get out of whitewater. It's these 20 words. Inc. magazine called them the 20 wisest words in business. I'm not going to argue with them. Here's what it says. When working in a group or team environment, and what's a group? It's 2 or more people. So that means at any time I'm talking to somebody, email somebody, in any group or team environment, put the interests of the enterprise. That's the thing that we're here to discuss. I put those interests ahead of my own. Now, one thing I want to make very clear here. When I talk about put the interests of the enterprise ahead of my personal interests, I don't mean what size of an office am I getting? What's my bonus next year? I mean putting the interests of the enterprise ahead of my need to scratch my visionary itch. That means in a meeting, I don't jump up when I get bored and change the subject. For an operator, it means putting the interests of the enterprise ahead of my need to scratch my operator itch. So I don't decline meeting invites because I hate meetings. Not all of them anyway. I go along, even to those people. Then I sit there and I participate. As a processor, I put the interests of the enterprise ahead of scratching my processor itch. What does that mean? Not bringing a 60-page PowerPoint deck for every single agenda item. You know, starting with the final slide, expressing an opinion, assessing risk in a reasonable way. By building that synergist mindset, everybody on your team can become visionary synergists, operator synergists, processor synergists. Excuse me, there's a little drilling going on outside. So, in conclusion, we want to build a visionary operator, processor, and then ultimately synergist team. If you would like to know what your own style is, pop over to synergistquiz.com, take you about 7-8 minutes. It'll pop it out. It's no bait and switch, a free quiz. You'd like to know what stage in the life cycle that you're in, go along to life cycle quiz. Here's my final comment on what we've just gone through. I have been spending my entire career helping people beat these odds. I've been spending my entire career helping people navigate their way through this very, very rocky road to predictable success. And even when you get in there, there's no guarantee that you won't slide down either side. I have always believed, and I've seen it demonstrated over and over again, that if you are going to make a success of this, you need to surround yourself with good people and good advisors who are going to keep you accountable for your own predictable success. And I know Gary and his team at BAS are amongst the best there is at this. I've been down there 3 times, as I mentioned, and I know the quality of what they do. And they prove it themselves, Gary and Wayne, in their own businesses and their own lives. So I just want to encourage you, if you have any thought of joining BAS, don't hesitate. I can personally recommend it. So with that, I'm going to stop. I'm going to come sit down. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And then, Wayne, we can get to some Q&A.
All right, Les, thank you so much. That was super informative. And for all of us on this other end receiving this, there's so many nuggets of wisdom here that we can literally take back and begin applying today. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, if you weren't here, if you do ask a question at the end of this, we're going to go back through and pick a few people at random, and we will send you some copies of Les's book. So if you got a question, go ahead and use the chat feature, use the Q&A feature down here. So Les, let's just go ahead and dive in. One question here is from Joseph, and it's, what role does a board play in these stages?
Okay, Joseph, do you want me to tell you the truth or be nice? Boards are a pain in the neck. And typically, not always, and hopefully if you have one, yours will be an exception to this. What happens with boards is that each of the members comes with the prejudices that are born of where either they are, if they're still active in business, or where they most enjoyed their time when they were in business. So if you've got a board that is a group of young, maybe tech type entrepreneur types, they're going to have a fascination with the startup phase, which is essentially early struggle. And they're going to ask you to do something that's a sin before anything divine. And that is to try to stay being a startup. And reasons we don't have time to go into. That's something that we as commentators in business have done a disservice to everybody. The last thing in the world you want to do is stay a startup, because you're just going to die eventually. If you've got a group of folks who are retired from very large organizations, they're going to bring at the least a treadmill mindset. They're going to typically, there are exceptions, but they're typically going to bring that treadmill point of view. If you pack a board, even with people who have run businesses in predictable success, and you're in fun, they're not going to put up with that. They're going to try to drag you to predictable success, which again doesn't work. You can't teleport from one part of the org cycle to another. You've got to iterate through. You can shorten the time in the difficult places. So it's a long way of saying, just be really careful with boards. I think they work best when the CEO or other most senior executive has got a good working relationship with them. They can use them as advisors and bounce stuff off them. But when the board starts to get dictatorial, you're into trouble. So there you go.
Great, Les, thank you. Here's another question from Lynn. Lynn says that her husband was a part of an international organization that closed about 3 years ago, and she can completely see all the stages that you presented today. Her question is, she's currently a one-woman operation, and she's curious, how does what you've just presented today apply to a very small organization like hers in the process of growing?
Well, there's one hugely important thing, Lynn, to be aware of, and it's this. As we saw, the two styles you need to get out of early struggle are the visionary and the operator. You don't need processors at that point, or synergists. There's nothing to synergize, and processors will only slow you up if you bring them in too early. So you need visionary and at least one operator. What I see happening over and over again, in fact, I'm just putting a course together literally this week as we talk about this very topic, is that really good founders, and you may be one of these people, Lynn, are actually visionary operators. They are both. And although I've caricatured it as if we're only one thing, style in the way through here, as you'll see if you take the quiz, we're all a combination. We're a mix. So typically we have a primary style and a secondary style. So I'm a VP, I'm a visionary processor. That's my mix. A lot of founder owners are VOs, they're visionary operators. They can do both. And you would think that's, that means I've got it. I have in myself what I need to get out of early struggle. And the problem is it doesn't work that way. If you are the visionary operator, you get into a cycle that I call the artisan cycle. So an artisan, you may well know, is just somebody who makes a handcraft. And I had a friend who makes upper class, really classy acoustic guitars. He is an artisan. Any guitarist that you know or singer-songwriter will own one of his guitars. And he will spend 2 years making one guitar, get a check with a comma, big check. And then he'll go to the beach for a year, and then he'll come back and make more guitars. What happens is we inadvertently get stuck with that if we are the visionary operator for this reason. When you're in an early struggle, selling is a visionary activity. You need to be full visionary to convince people to buy what you're selling, because you're new and nobody knows you. So you're out there being full visionary, and you sell. And then we've sold it. I've got to deliver. And that's an operator thing. So what do? I switch to my operator mode. And so I deliver. But while I'm delivering, operating, I'm not Ving, I'm not selling. I say, oh, I'll do that. And no, I've got to go out and sell like crazy. Oh no, I've got to do it. I'm going to go V-O, just and the circle's not getting any bigger. What you've got to do is you've got to be able to be and O at the same time. So that means you need to decide which of those two roles are you going to play. And that almost always is the visionary, because that's natively why you start the business. And go find yourself an operator. Now that bit's easy for me to say, and I know it's really, really tough and hard, because first of all, you got to find a way to pay them, compensate them. Secondly, you got to find somebody you can trust. And thirdly, what's their position in the business? Do you get them? So it's hard. It's not easy, and we don't have time to go into it all now. But you need to make sure you have separate visionary operator lanes so that you can vision, sell, and deliver at the same time in order to get out very strong.
Yeah, that's great, Les. And it ties into a question from Christy. She says, in a smaller business, what is the best strategy to enlist an operator or processor when you don't necessarily have enough revenue to bring them on? Do you hire a consultant or contractor? What do you recommend in that situation?
Oh, let's do the processor first, because that's the easiest one. If you don't have the revenue to pay for a processor, you're not yet at the stage where you should actually be hiring processors. So, for example, I have obviously no processors. I've got a bunch of 1099 people. So we'll all be, those of us in business, will be familiar with, probably your CPA is just like a one hit a year. You pay them a check and they produce your taxes. Even you get to the stage where you need bookkeeping, you should, and you're in fund, you should withstand bringing processors in as payroll as long as possible, because you want to only put them on payroll when you absolutely need them, and that's just as you're moving into whitewater. So I wouldn't sweat the needing to afford processors, because you shouldn't be hiring them until you're definitely making enough money to pay for them. Operators is the opposite issue. It goes back to the previous question. You've got to try to find a way to get an operator around, even if you can't afford. So whether that means, cashing in even more, and I'm not giving you advice here, by the way. Please don't go do this and then sue me. I'm just telling you the patterns that I see. I see people either going and cashing in more of their credit cards and just borrowing more money and finding a way to get that operator in, or being really creative, and often they'll align with somebody who knows them, supports the vision, will come in and maybe just work for some equity, or, which I don't recommend, by the way, work on deferred compensation, or work on a what you kill you eat a basis where you'll pay them on the come as the revenue comes in. Just anything that you can do to get them. And the question of fit is really, really important. And what that means with an operator is, it typically isn't going to work well with somebody who's leaving a very well-paid job in an organization up in the right-hand side of the life cycle, north, east, up there, sort of early treadmill, big organization and predictable success. Although there are exceptions, they typically don't have a mindset that's going to really jib with the early struggle stage. You want people who have been through that and know what it's like.
Yeah, this, Les, is another question very similar. Patricia says that she's tried working with a virtual assistant to help with some admin functions, and then that didn't work out. She tried a business strategist, and that didn't seem to work out either. So what would you say may be a happy medium or another path along that?
Yeah, well, those are two very different horizons, right? So the virtual assistant is at runway level, booking your calendar, sorting nitty-gritty stuff out for you. Business strategy is up here. I would say join BAS. That's the best way to get. It's not going to get all your virtual assistant stuff done, but it's going to help structure you in a way that will allow you to go and get a good assistant one way or another. They can help you with the strategy side. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And one of the things that I love about working with entities like BAS is, it's not as if you're there with the business strategist mindset of, you're a client and I'm essentially, this is a transaction where I make money out of you. They're there as a service, and they're wonderful at what they do. To come back to the virtual assistant thing, I would say give it another go. I'm really well aware, painfully well aware of the degree to which virtual assisting has a lot of promise that it often doesn't deliver on. And I have been through cycles of it just not gelling. But when it has done, which it's done 2 or 3 times in my career, it's worked really, really well. So I would say, give it another go. Be very clear about what your expectations are, and don't overload the individual at the outset. Build it over time. You can usually buy hourly packages like 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week. Start at the lowest one. Don't put yourself under enormous pressure to fill that time, and then hand out more as you build that relationship over time. What happens a lot is we dump everything at somebody, they get overwhelmed, they don't deliver for you, and the shine goes off the relationship. So start easy.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Les. One final question here for you is, as you look at the stages and as organizations, small businesses go through those stages, what would be some things that we could look for, some signs that we may be entering the next stage or approaching that next stage? What are some, either maybe it's revenue, maybe it's length of time, maybe it's number of employees. What are some of those things that we could look for as indicators?
Well, the transition from early struggle out to fun is typically looking, by the way, to back up what I'm about to say, if you're in early struggle, you need to learn how to make and read a simple cash flow. You don't need to become a CPA, but the only document you need to be able to do with ease is create a cash flow. And you need to face it down every week. You need to look at it. You need to be honest about it. You need to see what the hole is that you need to fill. Don't put projected income in there, only put real income. See what the actual hole is. And you'll know you're out of early struggle and in fun when you're looking at, and it depends on the industry, so don't hold me to this, when you're looking at regularly 3 to 6 months worth of revenue is there all the time. Of course, more than that, it's fantastic. But if you're regularly looking out and saying, I'm covered for the next 3 to 6 months, you're now in fun. Move from fun to whitewater, it's that sense that I'm losing control here, that when I turn the steering wheel, the car isn't going the way I want it to. I just don't feel like I have this sense of control. And we're standing on our own feet now. We're making mistakes, unforced errors. That's the sign that you're in whitewater. You know that you're in predictable success and come out of whitewater when you're not filling in any more potholes. It's literally, I've heard it said that way to me by my clients over and over again. I just feel like we're driving down the road, the car's going where I want it to go, and I don't have to fill in any potholes. Doesn't mean we don't have bumpy days, but we're not having to fix our own unforced errors.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Les. And thank you for taking time out of your day to come share with us. It's been, immensely beneficial for me. I've greatly enjoyed going back through this and hearing this again. Gary, I want to bring you back. And for those interested in learning more about the BAS program and the spots that you may or may not even have available right now, what do they need to do?
If you are interested in the Business Acceleration System program, the easiest thing is to email me, gperkins@synlod.org. You go to our website, there's my phone number on there. It's just get in touch with me. And for the larger businesses, Wayne, we're going to be doing a CEO roundtable this year. So it's for people that are leaving fun and going into predictable success. And we will be working with $1 million and up annual revenue companies. So same thing, if you are interested in us helping grow your business, just get in touch with us.
Excellent. Les, as a message there, join today. Les works again with entrepreneurs literally from around the world, large and small. And so as he's mentioned several times today, the importance of having the outside accountability, someone to push you, to challenge you, to point out things that you otherwise wouldn't see on your own. For everyone who's attended, we will get out all the slides. So a couple of questions about the slide deck. Les has generously given us those to distribute. We will pass those out as well. In that, there will be the links to the quizzes that Les mentioned, and we will go through the comments and we will choose some at random and send you out a few copies of books. Any final thoughts, Les or Gary?
I want to thank Les again for joining us. It's always a great pleasure to have him in Central Louisiana.
And thank you again. I hope I'll get to do it again with you many times. And I mean it. I don't often endorse things. I can't remember the last time I endorsed something. But what Gary's doing is exceptional. Don't hesitate.
Thank you.
Again, yeah, thank y'all so much. Everyone have a great day and stay dry. It's supposed to be wet the next few days down here. See ya.